G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
CEO of the Cherry Talent Group, who's based in Houston in the USA. And today we're going to be discussing the importance of the recruiting process and making it as easy and seamless as possible. So thanks for your time, Suman.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, how we know each other, Friday Adams, a podcast matching specialist who you engaged, reached out, and here we are today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation because it's such an important process, an important ingredient for a successful small business. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your experience on this topic.
For sure. So I have been recruiting for about 20 years. I started off in medical recruiting. I worked with physicians, and I started off with that. And then I moved in with oil and gas, which is pretty much Houston is all oil and gas. So I did that for a number of years. And then I transitioned recently over the last few years, like construction. So I started doing a lot of construction recruitment, project managers, construction managers, executive level. Most of my career had been in the contingent model, which is the traditional recruiting model where you hire an external recruiter and you don't pay an upfront fee, and then you pay a percentage of the placement fee, or the salary, the first year salary. It tends to be 20 to 25% in most markets. And then there's kind of a guarantee or something like that. So I did that for a long time. And then I had a client who approached me during COVID because things were kind of slow and said, would you be interested in doing some contract recruiting for us? And I was like, sure, I'd never done that. And I just really loved the model. It was just very different. When you are working in this more hourly based model, it's much more, there's a lot more urgency because people are paying you by the hour. And also there's a lot more communication. It creates a lot more transparency. And so then I started rolling it out. It's been very, very successful. And especially for smaller companies, a lot of the companies I work with, they have less than 20 people or 10 people. And the owners are like, I have to find these people. And I don't have the time to go source through hundreds of resumes and to interview people and all this. I need someone to help me with this. So that's kind of where it was born from. And it's been just wildly successful for smaller businesses, for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly a different approach to the typical recruitment business. So I'm glad you're sort of going outside the square and challenging the status quo. And I'm sure you'll be successful. So well done to have that leap of faith and to help more business owners recruit.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So obviously, and I talk to business owners regularly, and their frustration typically is finding good people, which obviously comes back to the recruiting process as part of that. So as far as the recruiting process, what do you see as the key aspects to that, and what small business owners should be aware of?
So I think there needs to be a lot of energy given to recruitment, right? Most of the time what happens is, the job description needs to be written, somebody puts something together, something, and a lot of times there's typos in it. The fonts are wrong, and then someone's like, oh, we'll start them on Indeed, see what happens, go ask everybody if you know anyone, right? Ask everybody, and then it's this sort of like mad rush to find people, right? And it's like, okay, and then the process starts, and then it just stalls, and then it ends up being kind of a mess. So the number one thing is that you are marketing yourself as a company. So like the time that you take, like you need to have a really serious conversation with yourself and your team about really what are we looking for? Because we all want the unicorn. Everybody wants the unicorn. But like, what do we really need? What is the most important? And a lot of times when you really look at what you really need, there are specific skills, but a lot of those skills can be trained, like they can be grown upon. But values in a person cannot be. It is like responsibility pieces, accountability pieces, the way someone is motivated or hungry, those places cannot really be, it's not something it's taught. You either are those things. So you have to be very clear about what are the pieces that are so important to you for this position, and essentially, and then creating a job description that really emphasizes who you are. People want to see who you are. When I put up a job description for our clients, I spend hours putting the job description down together. I go on their website, I'm creating the story. So when candidates are seeing that, they're already excited, right? They're already excited because good candidates are always hard to find. They're always difficult to find. So number one, I would absolutely say the job description is very important. You needs to have the essential positions and responsibilities of the role, and that needs to be defined and some level. It can be tweaked and changed in those types of pieces, but that is absolutely important. And also a sense of urgency. There is an urgency piece. When you put that position out there, you need to be responding to these candidates, because those candidates, the best candidates, are going to show up first a lot of times because the position's new. You need to be on top of that. And when you're talking to these candidates, you need to be having conversations, not just about like a checkbox of what their skills are, but who are they, right? Like, who are they as people? Like, what's kind of structure? Because everything, our family life, our work life, we all know this, it all bleeds together. So it's so, so important that if you're looking for someone, you're a smaller company, you need someone who's accountable. You need someone who's going to be humble. You're going to be someone who's motivated. And that's going to come with a lot of questioning, and to follow your instinct, not to have a scarcity mindset about candidates. Because a lot of times companies are like, oh, I have to hire someone, like I have to get rid of this person, or I just lost someone. And they bring someone in right away without fully vetting it, right? Like, there needs to be a process to it. And that's in the onboarding process, another story, but like all of it has to have a process, and that process needs to be set up before you even start the interviewing process, if that makes sense, before you start the recruitment process.
Yes, as far as the process goes, and I'm big on systems and processes for business because it gives one consistency. So in the context of recruiting, what are sort of the key components of that process that you refer to?
I think there needs to be an authority on who's handling what. If you have an HR person, what level are they handling it? Are they able to source the candidate and like them, and then they're interviewing them and moving it to the managers? And what's the accountability for those managers to respond? Because a lot of times what happens is HR people might find someone that's a good fit, and they may have screened them out, and they can't get the managers to commit to times of here's here, because nobody wants to have that ownership of it. But then what ends up happening is you miss out on really great candidates a lot of times. So there needs to be an authority on what the process is going to look like. How many interviews are we going to have? Not this, we might have two, we might have, no. And that needs to be conveyed to your candidates. There also needs to be, when are we going to hire this person, right? Like, it can't be some endless position. Like, it's a 30 days, 45 days, and you need to hold your team accountable to that and what that looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was only actually talking to a business owner yesterday, and they hired this person 3 weeks ago, and it's not working out. And he made the point that they probably were too reactive, and they picked the best of a bad bunch, was the sort of way he described it. So I think that's obviously can be a challenge. Somebody needs a role filled and they just pick the best of the bad bunch. So in that context, is there any sort of tips you can sort of let our listeners know?
I mean, I think, I think people don't really follow their intuition sometimes. Like, someone comes in and interviews, or a candidate on the candidate side, and something's off, but they don't want to believe that, right? Because they need to fill this position. And so they, like you said, they're kind of picking the bad out of like a bunch, they're picking the best out of a bad. I mean, that's never going to help you. You're better off waiting and hiring the right person. I mean, that would be my number one thing, because hiring the wrong person is a big deal. It's very expensive. It's very time consuming. But hiring the right person is the opposite, right? And when it's the right person most of the time, and not 100%, there's never 100%. But if you are a company looking, what do they say? Slow to hire, quick to fire. I mean, that is really true. You should take your time, because it's a big deal who you bring on. So, having really transparent conversations. I think that's really important as well. Like, candidates and clients need to have really transparent conversations. If candidates have questions, and the company doesn't need to have an ego about it, right? Like, this person is possibly changing their livelihood to come work for you. That's a big deal. So they need to be able to ask transparent questions about, even if it's salary wise or positions or what the responsibilities are. There should be transparency, and the client side as well. Like, there should be transparency with those conversations as well with those candidates. So because that person's going to work for your company, so you need to have a good understanding of who they really are, and vice versa.
Yeah, I do like the that saying, hire slow, fire fast, because I think it is very relevant in most cases. So with a business's core values, how important are they in the recruitment process, and what do you say to a business owner that may not have any core values sort of documented, if that's the case?
I mean, I think core values are essential. Like, every single candidate I talk to, I mean, it is about the money. Obviously, people want to make more money, or people want better growth, but they want to work for companies that have core values, and not just have them on a wall, but actually live them. Their leadership lives them. And I have had so many candidates who've interviewed for companies, and they've said, the leadership team, that's where I felt it, right? They really are their values. So I haven't come across a company who didn't have core values, but I would say to them, like, this is non-negotiable. Like, you have to have core values, because your whole foundation of your company is based on the values, and your leadership team needs to have those core values, and that needs to be spread around your business. And that's what you need to be hiring. That's what you need to be creating. And that's going to create everything else around that,
Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course, then add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's in small businesses, it's amazing how many necessarily don't have them documented. It might be in the owner's head, scribbled on a page. Certainly getting documented is a good starting point, but as you say, they've got to be lived every day. And I guess the conversations around them for all the people. So as you say, I think that client I mentioned yesterday, I think that was a gap in their recruitment process, was actually referencing the core values and part of their process. So as you say, it's a critical component, and should not be overlooked. And if you haven't got core values, it's time you looked at them and documented them, start living them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I think that is just so important, especially the leaders of the organization. And that needs to be carried through in all aspects. I mean, we're not perfect, we're human, but that's how a company is going to thrive, is that they live from those places of the core values.
Absolutely. So what are a few tactics that our listeners as small business owners could introduce to help them recruit well?
So number one, I would definitely make sure your job description isn't longer than a page. Like, you do not want some 5 or 6. I've had clients come to me and with 10-page, I'm like, no one's going to read that. It needs to be easy to read. It needs to explain your business. It needs to looks nice. It needs to stand out. So A, your job description. B, you need to pay for Indeed. Like, you need to pay for that. It's like just throwing it up there free. You're not going to get anything. You need to pay for it, but you need to keep an eye on that Indeed ad. Because I had a client today who told me, we realized that we spent like $2,800 on a month on an ad because we didn't pay attention to it. So you definitely need to have, again, back to the authority piece of who's going to be in charge of sourcing through these resumes. There needs to be if you're having an active position, you need to be contacting relevant people within 24 to 40 hours, like at least an email, a phone call, whatever it is, that needs to happen. Like, if you see an outstanding candidate and because you might get 200 resumes and 3 or 4 actually are the right matches, or 5, and those need to be called right away. The core values piece, like you're talking about, like, that needs to be emphasized, and that needs to be understood what their core values are. And So when you're evaluating candidates, you need to be able to ask questions that are going to kind of stimulate to see if they have those core values that you have. So, responsibility questions, or tell me about a time you failed. How did you overcome that? And tell me, and ask those like questions like on the resume, like, I see you moved 3 times, like what's going on, and someone gets defensive, then that's a different story. But if someone has legitimate reasons, and there are times where there's legitimate reasons, or they say, well, I take responsibility, and you're looking for someone who's going to have those values. So that's really important. The onboarding process is really important. You need to have some type of a structure on the onboarding. When you bring someone on, like there needs to be some idea of what type of onboarding, because this person doesn't know you, they're brand new. So you need to be able to, as a leader, you need to come in and you need to build that trust with that person, and let them see what their growth potential might be, and let them have some time with you, honestly, more than anything else. Like, so important that new hires always get time with leaders of organizations, even if it's just an hour, what else? I mean, Indeed has the ability to do deeper searches. So you can pay additional money and you can look for passive candidates in Indeed. It is very time consuming because you're going to have to sort through hundreds of resumes. But if you have a dedicated HR person, or if that's something you have time to do, that's a really good way to look for people as well. I mean, LinkedIn is incredible, but again, it takes a long time. You have to source through a lot of people. So these are kind of, but the job description would be like number one, and the authority of how the process is going to look from that standpoint would be so important.
Yeah, there's some good tips there for our listeners. You mentioned earlier it's as much a marketing process when you're recruiting. So maybe just elaborate on that.
So when you are, in most of the positions, I mean, there's always, I know people say, well, there's so many candidates. There's not. It's always the same, some version of the same market. Like, good candidates are always hard to find. They have jobs, or maybe they're out of work, but they have a lot of people after them, especially if they're technical roles. People are all, good candidates are always hard to find. So as a company, you need to be able to stand out, right? So you need to be able to understand, why does someone want to work for you? Like, the script has always been like, you want to work for us. Like, this is why you'd be honored to work for us. No, that's not the case anymore. Companies need to also show a candidate, like, why do you want to work for us? Like, what do we offer you? And they need to have that. Like, is there growth? Is there expansion? And where's their alignment? What's their mission? Like, people want to be part of something than just going to a job all day. They want to be part of something bigger. They want to be part of like a community. And that's what companies need to do when they're marketing to candidates.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And shouldn't be overlooked. So maybe just share a story with respect to, I guess, recruiting and a client you've dealt with recently.
I mean, I just recently filled some positions for a new client of mine. It was a construction client, and it was just so much fun. I mean, they were such a great company to work with. They have such an amazing office. They have a pickleball area in their office, and people bring their dogs, people bring their kids. I mean, they work really hard, but they've just built this beautiful community. And every single candidate that interviewed was just like so in awe and wanted to work there. They were just like, oh my gosh. And it was interesting because they had never worked with recruiters before, and they were like, we just have this revolving door and we don't know why. And I think it's exactly what you said. They had a group of okay candidates, and they were choosing the best out of the okay candidates. But this round, we had a project manager position, and I ended up not filling it, but I still gave them incredible options. They ended up filling it from a referral, and that was fine, right? But they got options. They got to see quality candidates that they got to choose from, and that's what everyone wants, Yeah,
no, it's that's great. And as you say, sounds like they've got a great environment as far as where people can come and work and enjoy their day and be productive.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think people want that. I mean, people have no problem working hard, but people want to feel like when they go into an office that they're not just, they're not just some transaction, right? They're a person and they have families and they have things going on in their lives, and their company cares about them and actually cares.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to close, Suman, what's at least one thing you'd recommend a small business owner does based on your knowledge and experience with recruiting?
Hire me? No, just kidding. I think getting really crystal clear when you are going to be looking for someone, to not just stick with this unicorn idea, because what ends up happening is when you have those, like, I need this like long list this big, and then you don't find it, and then you just settle for something else. So have like really honest conversations with your leadership team, a tier A candidate, tier B candidate. What does that look like? Do your research on the salary piece. Don't just throw a number out there because you think, oh, well, that's what we think it is. No, the market. So have flexibility with that as well, because you might find some rock star candidate and they're probably making more than you want to offer them. So you have to make that decision, because a lot of times you get the unicorn and they cost a lot of money. So you have to decide, is that what we really want? Or do we want to hire someone who has high value, has some good skills, needs to be trained, but that's the next level for them, and it's going to be a little less cost, right? So that needs to be understood by companies as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good little tip. Well, thank you so much for your time today. There's some great insights and tips that you've shared for our listeners. Wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.